stand in the middle of it and look straight up. You are under a ceiling of solid concrete. A single curved shell, wider than a basketball court, is long with nothing holding it up in the middle. No columns under it, no steel inside it, no cables, no props, no beams. Just a dome hanging over your head that has been hanging there since before your country existed, since before most of the languages you know existed. And right at the top of it there is a hole, an open, round hole nearly 30 feet across, straight through to the sky. When it rains in Rome, it rains inside this building, onto the floor, and the floor has little drains cut into it to let the water out, because whoever built this simply expected the weather to come in and planned for it. Now, I want you to understand something before we go one step further, because it is the whole reason I dragged you here. If you handed me the drawings for this ceiling today, this exact ceiling, this span, this material, no steel, and asked me to sign off on it, to put my name and my license on the line and promise you it would stand, I would not sign. I couldn't. And it has been standing over the heads of everyone who walked in for about 1900 years. My name's Dan. I build things for a living. Or, more honestly, I spend my days arguing with people about why the thing they want to build is going to cost twice as much and take 3 times as long as they were promised. I'm a structural engineer. I do the math that keeps floors from sagging and roofs from coming down on people's heads. And I do it with a computer that can run 1,000,000 calculations while I'm getting my coffee, with steel that comes with a certificate telling me exactly how hard you can pull on it before it snaps, and with a rulebook thick enough to stop a door, written in the blood of every building that ever failed. That's my job, and I am telling you as the guy whose job this is, that the men who built the thing over your head had none of that. No computer, no steel, no calculus. The actual mathematics you'd use to prove this dome is safe hadn't been invented yet and wouldn't be for another millennium and a half. They built it anyway, and it's still here. So let's do what I do. Let's figure out how the hell they pulled it off. This is the Pantheon in Rome. And before I get into the engineering, I have to clear up a lie carved right into the front of the building, because it fooled people for centuries and it's a beautiful little mess. Walk up to the front and look at the inscription over the columns. Big bronze letters. It says in Latin that Marcus Agrippa built this. Agrippa was a general and a right-hand man of the Emperor Augustus, and he did build a pantheon on this spot around 25 years before Christ. But here's the thing. That building burned. Rome was a city of fires, and Agrippa's original went up in flames, was patched up, and then, by most accounts, burned again. What you are standing inside is not Agrippa's building. The Pantheon as it stands was rebuilt from the ground up under the Emperor Hadrian, somewhere around 113 to 125 in the Common Era, well over a century after Agrippa was dead. So why does it still have Agrippa's name on it? Hadrian, who put his own name on plenty of projects, chose, on this one, to keep the old inscription. Historians still argue about exactly why. Maybe modesty, maybe a nod to the past, maybe good politics, crediting the beloved old general rather than trumpeting himself. We don't have Hadrian's diary, so I'll be honest and call that what it is, informed guessing. But the fact itself is solid and stamped into the very bricks. Study the brick stamps in the structure and they date to Hadrian's reign, not Agrippa's. So the sign on the door is off by more than 100 years. On my sites, we put the wrong date on a permit and the whole job gets shut down. This building has been quietly lying about its own age since the Romans, and nobody minds, because the real story is better than the label. Now, the dome. Let me tell you plainly what makes an engineer's stomach drop when he really looks at it. That dome up there is the largest unreinforced concrete dome on the planet. Not the largest in ancient times. The largest full stop still today after 19 centuries, with every modern crew and crane and computer we've got. Nobody has built a bigger one out of plain concrete, and I need you to hear that word, unreinforced, because it's the whole ball game. When you and I pour concrete today, a bridge, a parking garage, the foundation of a house, we do not trust the concrete on its own. We can't. Concrete is fantastic at being squeezed and terrible at being stretched. Push down on it, it's happy. It'll hold up a mountain. But pull it apart, even a little, and it cracks like a dry cracker. So we bury steel bars inside it, rebar, and the steel handles all the pulling while the concrete handles all the pushing. Every piece of modern concrete you've ever trusted your life to has a skeleton of steel hidden inside it. It's not concrete. It's a team. This dome has no steel. None. There is no skeleton in there. It is pure concrete, and it is holding itself up across a span of about 140 feet using nothing but the one thing concrete is actually good at, being squeezed. Every ounce of that ceiling is in compression, pressing on the ounce next to it, all the way around, all the way down. It is 140 feet of squeeze, balanced so carefully that it has never needed to pull on anything. And that, right there, is a magic trick I genuinely could not perform for you today with the same materials. And I want to be fair here, because accuracy matters to me more than a good line. Modern crews have poured a handful of larger, reinforced concrete domes. Sure, but those cheat in the honest sense with steel doing the pulling. Strip the steel out and ask any of us to span 140 feet in plain concrete and keep it up for 2 millennia, and the room goes very quiet. Nobody's beaten it on the hard setting. So how did they? Let's take it apart piece by piece. Start with the shape, because the shape is the first piece of genius, and it's the one most people walk right past. Here's a fact that stopped me cold the first time I read it, and then I got out a tape measure in my head and checked it, the way you do. The inside of this building is a perfect sphere, not sort of round. A sphere. The diameter of the dome, how wide it is exactly equal to the height from the floor to the very top, to that hole in the ceiling. Both of them come to roughly 142 feet, about 43 meters. Which means if you took a giant ball, 142 feet across, and lowered it into this building, it would fit perfectly. It would kiss the floor at the exact center, and its top would touch the underside of the oculus, and its sides would brush the walls all the way around. The whole interior is one clean, invisible globe of air. That is not decoration. To the Romans, that geometry meant something, the heavens, perfection, the cosmos in a room, and I'll leave the philosophy to people smarter than me. But as an engineer, that sphere is doing quiet, serious work. A sphere is one of the most naturally stable shapes there is for carrying load, because it spreads force evenly in every direction at once, with no weak corner for trouble to gather in. They didn't just make a beautiful room. They made a beautiful room whose beauty is the same thing as its strength. My intern once asked me, her name's Priya. She asks the questions the rest of us are too proud to, she asked. Why don't we build like that now, round and whole like an egg? And the honest answer is, because it's hard and slow and it doesn't stack into rentable square floors. We stopped building spheres the moment we started renting by the square foot. They weren't renting anything. They were making a statement to the gods. You get different buildings when that's the brief. All right. Beautiful shape. But a beautiful shape still weighs thousands of tons, and all that weight wants to do one thing, fall on you. So here comes the second piece of genius, and this is the one that makes me shake my head and grin, because it is so simple and so clever that I'm a little jealous I didn't think of it. The dome is not made of the same stuff all the way up. Think about what a dome actually needs. Down at the bottom, at the spring line where the dome meets the walls, it needs to be strong and heavy and solid, because that's where all the weight funnels down and presses outward. But up at the top, near that hole, weight is the enemy. Every extra pound up high is a pound trying to push the whole thing outward and crack it open. So what you want, ideally, is a dome that's heavy and tough at the bottom and light as you can make it at the top. And that is precisely what they built. The Roman concrete in this dome is graded. Down at the base, they mixed it with heavy, strong aggregate chunks of travertine, hard stone, dense brick and tough, real muscle. Then, as the dome climbs, they deliberately swap the recipe. They started mixing in lighter and lighter stuff, and near the very top, up around the oculus, the concrete is loaded with pumice and light volcanic scoria. Pumice. The stone so full of air holes it famously floats on water. They built the top of the roof out of a stone that floats, so the dome gets lighter layer by layer, exactly as it rises, lightest right where a dome most wants to be light. They tuned the weight of the building to the job each part of it had to do. No computer told them to do that. No formula. That is pure material intuition, worked out by men who had poured 1,000 walls and had a feel for stone the way a great cook has a feel for heat. When I want to change the density of a material on one of my jobs, I order a different product with a spec sheet from a supplier. They just reached into a different pile, and it worked so well it's still up there. Look up again. See those sunken square panels covering the whole underside of the dome, row after row, getting smaller as they climb toward the center. Those are called coffers, and most people think they are there to look pretty. They do look pretty. That's not why they are there. Every one of those recess panels is concrete that isn't there. It's material they scooped out and didn't pour. And that's the trick. They hollowed out the ceiling in a careful, regular pattern to take weight out of the dome without taking strength out of it. The ribs left between the coffers still carry the load down. The empty pockets in the middle are just weight they refuse to lift. It's the same idea as the holes in a steel beam or the honeycomb inside an aircraft floor. You remove material from the places that were only along for the ride, and you keep every gram that's actually working. So think about what these people were doing all at once. They made the concrete itself lighter toward the top, and they carved weight out of the shape on top of that. Two completely different strategies for the same goal. Get this thing to hold its own weight stacked together in one ceiling. This is not luck. You do not get lucky twice in the same direction. This is engineering, the real thing, done 1,800 years before anyone had a word for the math behind it. Now let's talk about the part you can't see, which is where I actually spend most of my working life. The boring, load-bearing guts that nobody photographs. Because a dome doesn't just press straight down. A dome pushes out all the way around its base, like a heavy person slowly sitting on a beach ball. That outward push, that spread, is what kills domes. It's what cracks them and splits them and brings them down. So the real question isn't just how they built the dome. It's what's catching all that outward shove and where is it going? The answer is in the walls. The walls holding this dome up are not walls the way you picture a wall. Down at the base, they are about 6 meters thick. 20 feet of solid structure ringing the whole building. A drum so massive it acts like a belt cinched around the base of the dome, holding it in, refusing to let it spread. And here's the clever bit again. That 20 feet of wall is not one dumb slab of concrete. Hidden inside it, buried where you'll never see them from the floor, are voids, chambers, and a whole series of brick-relieving arches. Arches built right into the thickness of the wall. And what an arch does, the one Roman trick that runs under everything they built, is take a load and split it, carry it around an opening, and channel it down and out to where you want it to land. So the wall is secretly a network of arches, quietly gathering up all the weight and thrust of that dome and steering it down through the strong points into the ground, like a river system routed through the stone. From inside, it looks like a simple round room. It is anything but simple. It's one of the most sophisticated load management systems in the ancient world, and it's doing its job so smoothly that for 19 centuries most people standing in here never knew it was working at all. That's the mark of the very best structural engineering, by the way, and I say this with envy. When it's done perfectly, it disappears. Nobody thanks the arch they can't see. And here's a question that keeps me up at night as a builder, not just as an admirer. How do you even pour this thing while it's going up? Because concrete is a liquid when you place it. Wet concrete does not hold a curve in midair. It runs downhill and lands in a puddle. So to build a dome out of the stuff, you first have to build a second structure, a giant wooden mold, a scaffold in the exact shape of the finished dome, called centering, and pour your concrete on top of that, and hold it there supported, for as long as it takes to cure and become self-supporting. Only then can you take the wood away and find out whether your dome stands or comes down on the crew. Just imagine the timber. To hold up the underside of a 140-foot dome, you need a temporary forest of scaffolding filling the entire interior, floor to crown, precise enough that its curved upper surface is the exact shape you want the ceiling to take. That wooden falsework was, on its own, one of the great construction feats of the ancient world, a whole hidden building, built to be thrown away. And they poured the concrete not in one heroic go but in careful horizontal rings, layer on layer, working up and inward, letting each ring set and grip before the next went on, so the dome grew like the rings of a tree. The moment they struck that centering and pulled the timber out and the dome held its own weight for the first time with nothing under it, I would have given anything to be standing there. Nobody signs off on that with a computer model. Somebody signed off on that with their nerve. Which brings us, finally, to that hole in the ceiling. The oculus, the eye, nearly 30 feet across, wide open to the sky, no glass, no cover, never has been. And most people look at it and think, what a gorgeous idea, a beam of sunlight moving around the room like the hand of a clock, the sky right there in the ceiling. And yes, it's one of the most beautiful things in all of architecture. It's the building's only source of light, no windows anywhere else. So the whole vast room is lit by that single moving circle of daylight, and it is genuinely breathtaking. But put your engineer's hat back on for 1 second, because the oculus is also doing something ruthless and smart. Remember, the top of a dome, the crown, is exactly where you do not want weight. Weight up high is what pushes a dome apart. So what did they do at the single most sensitive point of the entire structure, the keystone of the whole thing? They left it out. They put a big empty hole there instead. That opening removes a huge amount of material from precisely the worst possible place to have it. The ring of concrete around the oculus acts like the tightened top of the structure, and the hole itself means there's simply no heavy, crack-prone lump of roof sitting up at the crown waiting to fail. The most beautiful feature of the building and the smartest structural move in the building are the same hole. They didn't compromise between beauty and engineering. They found the one move that was both. And the rain, they just let it come in. There's a slight rise to the floor under the oculus. It's gently convex, higher in the middle, and it's fitted with drainage holes, so the water that falls through runs off to the sides and away. They didn't fight the weather. They outthought it. Try, and here it is. The one time I'll say it, try getting that past a modern safety inspector. A 30-foot permanent hole in the roof of a public building, with rain coming through onto a stone floor people are standing on. My permit officer would need to lie down. And the Romans did it on purpose, and it's the best part. But I've been dancing around the real secret this whole time, and it's time to get into it, because it's not just the shape or the coffers or the hidden arches. It's the actual stuff. It's the concrete itself. Roman concrete is not our concrete. We tend to assume our version is the advanced one. We've got the labs and the certificates and the 18-wheelers full of it. But by one brutal measure, the measure that matters most, theirs beats ours flat. It lasts. Ours crumbles in decades. Theirs is going strong after 2,000 years, and it's sitting in seawater in some places, which eats modern concrete alive. So what's in it? The Romans mixed lime and water with a very particular ingredient, pozzolana, a volcanic ash. The name comes from Pozzuoli, a town near Naples in the shadow of the volcanoes, where they dug the good stuff out of the ground. That volcanic ash reacts chemically with the lime to form a binder that is extraordinarily tough and, crucially, doesn't mind water. It'll even cure underwater. That's already a better mix than most of what came after it for over 1,000 years. And here's the cruel irony of my industry. Modern concrete is stronger than theirs on day one. Test a fresh cylinder of our stuff against a fresh cylinder of theirs, and ours wins the strength number easily. But strength on day one and survival across 20 centuries are two completely different contests, and we optimized hard for the wrong one. We built things that are very strong and don't last. They built things that aren't as strong on paper and refuse to die. If you only get to keep one of those two traits, ask yourself which one you'd actually want holding up the roof over your kids. And then there's the part that's genuinely new science. So I'm going to flag it clearly as recent and still being worked out, not settled gospel. Because on this channel, I'd rather tell you the truth than a clean story. For a long time, everyone assumed the little white chunks you find scattered through Roman concrete were just sloppy mixing, bits of lime that never blended in properly. But researchers, including a team at MIT that published on this in 2023, argued something much more interesting. They think the Romans were mixing the lime hot mixing, and that those little lime chunks, the lime clasts, aren't a mistake at all. They're a repair kit, baked right into the material. Here's the idea, and it's gorgeous. A tiny crack forms in the concrete over the centuries. Normal, unavoidable, happens to everything. Water gets into that crack. But when the water reaches one of those little lime clasts, it reactivates it, dissolves it, and it recrystallizes, filling the crack back in and sealing it. The concrete heals itself, the very thing that destroys our concrete. Water getting into cracks and reaching the steel and rusting it and blowing the whole thing apart from the inside. That same water in their concrete might be triggering a repair. Now, I'll say again, this is recent. It's debated, science works by argument, and not everyone agrees on every detail. But the durability itself is not in doubt. It's over your head right now, doing fine. So let's stand back and look at the whole thing at once, because here's the turn that really gets me, the one I keep chewing on long after I've left the building. Everything I just walked you through, the sphere that's strong because it's whole, the concrete tuned from heavy at the base to floating pumice at the crown, the coffers carving out dead weight, the 6 meters of wall hiding a river of arches, the oculus that solves light and load with a single hole, the self-healing chemistry. They did all of that with no steel to save them, no computer to check them, and no calculus to prove any of it before they built it. The mathematics and engineer like me leans on to guarantee a structure like this is safe. The real analysis of forces and stresses, that toolkit didn't exist yet. It wouldn't be developed for the better part of 1,500 more years. So they didn't calculate their way to this. They felt their way to it. Generations of builders, pouring and watching and adjusting, passing hard-won judgment down hand to hand, until they had an intuition for stone and load so refined it produced this. A thing our proof-checked, spec-sheeted, computer-modeled modern industry still can't beat for the plain, simple job of standing there. My foreman, Mike, has a phrase for guys like that, the old hands who can look at a beam and tell you it's overloaded before any gauge does. He calls it feel. Mike would have loved these people. Mike takes shortcuts I have to chase him down about, but even Mike, on his worst day, wouldn't dream of a shortcut like leaving out the steel and trusting the mix. These men bet everything on feel and they won, and the winnings are still standing. And now here's the gut punch. After Rome fell, that knowledge, the recipe, the pozzolana mix, the whole hard-won art of concrete at this quality was effectively lost in Europe. Not misplaced for a season, lost for roughly 1,000 years. For a millennium, nobody on the continent could build like this again. People walked into this very building through the whole of the Middle Ages, stood under a dome they had no idea how to reproduce, and just couldn't. The know-how died with the empire, and it took 1,000 years to claw it back. Think about that the next time somebody tells you progress only ever moves forward. It doesn't. You can absolutely forget how to do something your great-great-grandparents did in their sleep. We have the proof, and it's got a hole in the roof. And that's really why I wanted to bring you here, because this is the part that follows me home from a building like this and sits with me on my own job sites. I pour concrete that is not expected to last. I'll be honest with you because that's the deal on this channel. A lot of what we build today, the garages, the overpasses, the flat gray boxes, is designed quietly, on the assumption that it'll be torn down or need major repair in 50 years, maybe less. We build to a budget and a schedule and a lease, and the question in the room is almost never will this be here in 1,000 years. The question is, can we finish by the deadline and come in under budget? I had a project once that ran 200% over budget, and the entire fight, every meeting, was about shaving cost and time, cheaper mix, thinner slab, faster pour. Nobody in that room ever once asked whether it would outlive us. It was never the point. The Romans built this to stand forever, and it more or less has. We build to be replaced, and we more or less are. And I don't think that's because they were smarter than us. They weren't. They had a fraction of what we know. I think it's because they were asking a different question. They wanted permanence. We want fast and cheap. And you get exactly what you ask for. Every single time, you get exactly what you ask for. So when I stand under that dome, I don't just feel admiration. I feel a kind of quiet embarrassment for my whole profession, and maybe for the whole way we do things now, because we didn't lose the ability to build things that last. We've got better tools than they ever dreamed of. We chose not to. We traded it away, a little at a time, for speed and for price, until building something to outlast your grandchildren started to sound not noble but wasteful. And I'm not sure that was a good trade. I look up at that ceiling, this 2,000-year-old roof holding perfectly steady over my head, And then I think about the things I've signed off on that won't see the end of the century, and I honestly don't know how to feel about my own job. That's what this building does to you if you let it. It doesn't just show you what they could do. It asks you, quietly, what you're settling for. So here's my question for you, and I read the comments, I really do. I want you to think of something near you right now that was built to last. Something old and stubborn and still working, a stone bridge, an old wall, a 100-year-old house that's outlived everything thrown up around it. And then tell me, do you think anything we're building today will still be standing in 2,000 years? Anything at all? I want to hear what you'd bet on. Drop it in the comments. I read everyone and I'll argue with the good ones. If you like this, if you want to stand under more things that should have fallen down centuries ago and figure out with me why they didn't, then subscribe and stick around, because I've got a whole world of impossible stone to take you through, and every single one of them is going to make me a little more jealous of people who've been dead for 2,000 years. My name's Dan. Watch your head, and the next time you walk past some plain old thing that's still standing when it had no business lasting this long, give it a nod from me. Somebody built that on purpose. We used to know how.